So hey everybody, my name is Danny Smith. I'm a senior manager in product management on the SageMaker Canvas team, and it's my pleasure to be with you here today. So the topics we're going to talk about today are we're going to cover the current state and some challenges with how machine learning value creation starts and progresses. We're going to talk about how we can scale that ML value creation by enabling business analysts. We're going to give you an overview of SageMaker Canvas and including a demonstration of use to solve one of those business problems, which is where we'll spend most of our time, right? Then I'll cover some getting started and some tips and tricks, and then we'll wrap it up and allow you to ask questions. So let's dive in. So if we look at the machine learning industry kind of advancements over the last 10 plus years or so, what you saw is, maybe 10 or 12 years ago, what you saw was we were focused a lot on building machine learning technology, right? And then what you've seen is over, say 5 years or so, what we've seen is people have then said, how do we ease the adoption of that technology? And really now the expectation, from our customers is how do we take machine learning mainstream, right? And so today you'll hear us talk a lot about personas, and so I want to cover some personas. So in early days, it was data scientists and really research scientists, building out this ML technology, things like deep learning and stuff. When we got into easy and ML adoption, new characters came into play, right? So we had data engineers who were focused on getting the data ready for machine learning. We had data scientists doing the model building and stuff, and then we had ML engineers preparing the pipeline. But if we want to get to mainstream ML machine learning adoption, we need to help business analysts. Now, why do I say that? Well, this is what our customers were saying when they talked to us. They said, look, we want to unlock the value in our data, and we all recognize that machine learning is a competitive advantage. Often our conversations got to how do we get to more ML builders? And what they really were thinking about was we want to democratize ML. So we want to just have that value of ML everywhere in our organization. So that sounds pretty straightforward. We've progressed. Where are the sticking points? So if we go and look at where the machine learning value creation process is today, as you saw, we had a bunch of focus over the last 10 or 12 years from personas like a research scientist or data engineer or data scientist or ML ops. And so we tended to spend a lot of time talking to those people who are concerned with data preparation and feature engineering, right? Model development and training, model deployment, right? But if we think about where the journey starts, buried somewhere in the line of business, there is an analyst who is not a machine learning professional, right? Who is not a coder, doesn't know, Python, all these things, right? They have a business problem. And so they're thinking about this business problem like, hey, I'm a marketing analyst and I want to predict when my customers leave, right? Called churn, right? Churn. And so they're thinking about this problem and they have data that might be appropriate to help them get some new insights, right? But then they kind of get stuck, right? And the reason they get stuck is there's like a barrier to entry. So the people on the right, right, the personas on the right, they're the ones who can help them give insights, but they're a scarce resource, right? And so there's often this conversation of, hey, can you, business analyst says, hey, data science teams, can you help me, take a look at this problem? And the data science team said, well, we're really busy right now. We're helping a whole lot of people. Can you get in line? Or they'll say, well, tell me what the value is, right? With an ROI or, return on investment or something like that. And so this kind of gets the business analyst stuck because their response is, hey, that's what I need you guys to help me with, right? I don't know the ROI. All I know is I have some data, which I think could be relevant. And, I have a question to see if it is. And so if you think about that kind of, cycle, you can easily get stuck. And our customers told us we get stuck with months, weeks and months of delay trying to get to the value, and we only cover a really small part of the value, right? Or we only cover a small set of use cases. So it's a big problem. So can you help us with this, right? And so as our customers were thinking about this, they were coming up with things like, how do we scale this thing, right? And so the first thing is we can scale the machine learning professionals, right? And so as if you look at AWS products like Amazon SageMaker, which is a managed service for machine learning, I would argue that we've been kind of doing, that product has been out 5 years. That's what we've been doing with that product, is we're actually increasing machine learning professionals' productivity, right? Just removing undifferentiated heavy lift, et cetera, right? And then the other approach is, let's go hire more data scientists, as an example. And so the problem is these statistics come from a LinkedIn emerging jobs report that basically says that, AI practitioner, et cetera, right? Data scientist, this is the most popular job category out there, right? Over the last 4 years. And so what this means is those resources are in demand and expensive and scarce. And so then the third part of the conversation is, well, if we're really trying to democratize machine learning innovation, can't we help maybe just let other people besides these core specialists produce machine learning models and then take advantage of them? And so that leads us into conversations around AutoML, right? So if we look, just very briefly about some of the challenges, especially from the business analyst perspective, right? What we see is that, okay, one, analysts lack expertise, and it's a heavy lift to get them, from a business analyst to a data scientist, right? And so we have customers who are pursuing these kind of ML universities and things like that, but it's heavy lift and it takes a while, right? And most analysts may not actually be interested in that either, right? They focus on their domain day jobs, right? But if you look at the other challenges, the business doesn't need another shadow IT organization, right? And so what they need is that whatever, if we do give the business analyst some AutoML, we need to make sure that we understand what it's doing. And by say we, I mean the data science groups can actually go in and look at it. And so it's transparent and they can have visibility into what the decisions are. And they can, the data science groups can validate that model is good for the analyst, if necessary. And then the last thing our customers told us is the challenge right now, with the market, as they saw it when we were talking, is there are tools out there, but they're just expensive because people charge, upfront license fees. And it would be really nice if, they didn't have that, right? If you could just pay as we go. And then the other thing they said was a lot of those tools are black boxes. And so the trust and credibility is just not there. So this was the environment where we developed Canvas. And so Amazon SageMaker Canvas is really a point and click tool that allows you to kind of pull data in, prepare it for machine learning, use built-in AutoML to kind of build models, and generate insights from those models, as well as run predictions all in app. You can share those models with data science teams and collaborate with them to kind of get verification, and then it's usage-based pricing. So this is the majority of the PowerPoint I want to share with you today. We'll quickly bounce over into the demo in just a second, but I want to talk about use cases, because what I want to do is show you a specific use case. But let me first say that there are lots of use cases within line of business organizations where this may be appropriate, right? And so I'm going to focus on a sales and marketing use case, one I mentioned earlier, right? Can I understand why my customers may leave me, right? And so that's a propensity to churn model. But there's lots of other ones within finance accounting for like risk models, and then operations for things like understanding quality and things like that. So there's a lot of opportunity out there, no matter where you are in an organization, to kind of take advantage of this. So let's talk about very specifically some use cases, right? And so I want to make sure that everybody understands that Canvas is not a magic bullet for everything. Where Canvas shines is with tabular data, right? So when you think of tabular data, think of data in a spreadsheet, right? I have rows and columns, and they may be categorical, they may be numeric, or they may be, timestamps. But that's kind of what the data consists of. And so if to help me solve a business problem, I have data in this form, and especially where I have a target column that I want to see if I can explain or predict by the other columns, then this is a perfect example of how you can take advantage of Canvas. So with that, let's bounce into a use case demonstration. And so what I'm going to do is not start in Canvas, because if you think of the typical business analyst, where do they, spend most of their time? A spreadsheet. Now you don't have to be in a spreadsheet. Your data can be in a database, and we'll show that in a minute. But let's just take a look at this data for a second. So here's the use case. I'm a marketing analyst, and I have some data related to my customer history, and then I have some information on whether they left or not. And I want to see if any of this information can help me understand if they left. And so the industry that I'm in is I actually work for a mobile phone operator. And so I think everybody listening in today can relate to this use case, right? Because you probably have a smartphone in your pocket. And so what we're looking at here is information on the smartphone, customer, right? So how long have they been a customer, right? Account length. Just, descriptive, like what's their account number, basically. It's the phone number. Do they have things like international plans or voicemail plans, or then some descriptive things like how many voicemails, or how many total minutes, or things like how many times they've called customer service. And then we also have this information on churn, right? So it's very typical. We have this data, and all we want to do really is be able to kind of understand if we can predict churn, or if we can explain churn by all these other columns. So let's go into Canvas and let's see if we can do that. So I've already uploaded a bunch of data, but I'm going to start you from the beginning. So if you've never come into Canvas before, one thing I'll point out, and you can access it by just pressing this little question mark, it's the help down in the lower left. You get a really nice guided tour that comes in immediately as a user, right? And so you can watch the whole thing getting started with Canvas, or you can pick different sections. So as an example, what I'm going to show you today in this demonstration, where we're going to get some insights on churn, we're going to do everything on here. We're going to learn how to import data sets. We're going to build a model. We're going to analyze a model. We're going to run a model for prediction, etc. Right? So if you want to start Canvas and then see what you're supposed to do, and you're like, okay, I'm not really sure, just click on that question mark and you'll get this guided tour as a user. And it's really nice, right? So just, I won't do it all, but I'll just start it off and just kind of show you, right? So the tutorial operates within the app itself, right? So it just says, hey, here's the datasets page, right? So go there, and then, press this import data button, right? And then, go find some data, right? And click on that, right? And so rather than, let that continue, we'll just do it in front of you. But just always understand, if you press the help button, you get this guided tour. It's pretty powerful, and our customers love it. Okay, so let's build a model, right? So maybe the first thing we do, I'm just going to actually start by building a model. So I'll press new model. And as you can see, I do a lot of models. So I'll just create Danny's new churn model. And then I'll go and get some data, right? So like I said, I've imported a bunch, but I'll just show you how it works. So I can import data in a number of ways. One is I can pull it from databases like Redshift or our partner Snowflake. And so I have a Redshift database set up. I can pull it from S3. So S3 is our AWS storage, right? So it's, you know, just a storage location. And so I can pull data there. I can upload it from my desktop. And so I'll do this just to kind of show you lowest common denominator, because everybody has data floating around in, you know, in a flat file somewhere. So let's take a peek, right? So I'll go in here and I'll pull this, and because I can't remember where I put it. There we go. Here's telco churn, that spreadsheet that I just showed you. So I'm going to open it up. Excuse me. And then we can kind of take a look and see what's there, right? So we can confirm that this is the data we thought it was, right? So I'm going to scroll over. We have churn data. This is exactly the data we want. I'm going to press import data, right? And so it's importing telco churn, right? So now, once we have telco churn, we can progress. But I want to show you some other things too. Let's say that instead of a flat file, we wanted to take a look at, you know, this relational, you know, database. So a lot of business analysts have access via SQL and stuff to a relational database. And so I actually have some data somewhere in here. And so I actually have a couple of different things. So one is I've got my customer, let's see, my customer churn history, right? So if we take a look at that, we can see that it actually is just account ID and then whether they churn or not, right? So that's definitely something I want. So I can drag it over. And then I also have customer usage in here. And so we'll take a look at that just to make sure that that's the information that we want to, right? So customer usage. Yep, so this is my account ID again, and then whether they have like international plans, et cetera, all the usage information, whether they called customer service. So yep, that's the right one. So we'll just take that and we'll drag it over. And because we need to connect those two together, right, for the analysis, Canvas will allow you to kind of connect it together, and, you know, Canvas will figure out how to connect it and stuff. And so just let that process a second. And so what it said is, if, you know, you have an interest in these things, it says, yep, we did account ID, and then it looked like area code and phone number. You know, you can modify these kind of things and say, yeah, it's just account ID, save and close. This is the data we want, right? There's a couple of other things in here which are interesting. So one is if you are, you know, experienced in SQL, which, you know, some analysts are, you can go in. So Canvas will auto generate that SQL for you, but you can go in and manipulate it if you want and pull out. And so be aware that that is in there as well. So I'm not going to save this join. I'm actually just going to go back to the data we just loaded to kind of help you see. So here's my model, right? Danny's new churn. I'm selecting telco churn, which I just updated. And then let me select that. And so what Canvas is doing when we tell it, you know, yep, that's the data we want, Canvas is going to start looking at all of the information in there and doing some analysis, right? It's going to look at data type. It's going to see if there's missing or mismatched values, you know, what some of the statistics on those are. You know, it'll let you kind of see graphically. I'm like a visual person, so I always like to see what the data looks like and stuff. And so we, you know, definitely have this kind of information. And so the first thing we want to do is select a column to predict. And so we wanted to do churn, right? So I'm really interested to see if any of this data can help me predict churn. Now, when I selected churn, right, Canvas goes and takes a look at that, the information in that column. And it says, okay, it looks like you have two values, false and true. So Canvas automatically recommends a model type, right? We think this is a two-category prediction. You know, it classifies churn into two categories. So you can just kind of like say, yes, that's correct and move on, or if you for some reason want to, or, if you have different data, right, you can kind of override that. So Canvas can handle, right, remember tabular data, but it can handle two category, right? So in other words, what a data scientist would call a binary classifier. It can handle multi-class classifiers, right? So if you have multiple categories, not just two, it'll be able to handle where your target is a numeric. So things like what people think about for regressions. And then if you have a timestamp in your data, you can also do time series forecasting, but we don't have a timestamp, so that's grayed out. So for this purpose, though, yep, that's right. We think we know it's a two category prediction we want to do. So now what's the next thing that I'll do? Well, I want to press this preview model button, because right now I don't really know if any of this data explains or predicts churn, but I want Canvas to kind of take a really quick pass to see if it's worth actually doing some model training, right? And so what preview model does is it does a really quick pass. It gives you 2 bits of information, usually pretty fast, right? And so one is estimated accuracy. Yep, it's already popped up. So estimated accuracy is, how accurate, based on all these explanatory columns, how accurate can I get with the target column? So 96% probably means I want to do some training, but the other thing that preview model will give you, if we wait a little while, is it'll give you feature importance, right? So which of these columns is actually the most impactful to the model, right? And so, in the interest of our time together, I'm going to do what's called a cooking show demo. I'm going to switch to another model where we've done some runs. But before I do that, I want to talk about the types of things you do after preview. So let's say preview model, this looks good, 96%. We're interested in this. What do we do next, right? Well, if we want to get additional insights, we have to do a full model training. So there's 2 options here. One is standard build, and this is like full auto ML. It does a bunch of pre-processing. It automatically cleans up missing values, and it automatically transforms the data into things that the model takes better advantage of in that form. It does algorithm selection, so which algorithms are the best. It goes through model training, so it does 100 iterations of something called hyperparameter optimization. So for those of you who are not data scientists out there, hyperparameter optimization, there's just parameters in these models that you can make small tweaks to the input parameters, and you sometimes get better results. And so what this is doing is, if you run standard build, it'll take 2+ hours, but you'll get a very good model. Now, if you're just starting out, if you're just exploring your data, you may not want to wait 2 hours. You may want to say, hey, I don't need the full auto ML best practice, workflow. I just need something quick and dirty so I can do the analysis. And so you have a quick build option, right? So quick build gives up a little bit about those best practices, but it takes 15 minutes to run. And so usually the progression is what we see our customers doing is they run preview model to see if it's worth pressing the button, then they run quick maybe a few times, and then they run standard. So let's switch over to one where we've actually gone through some of that progression. And here it is, telco churn. And let's pick up the story kind of after we press the training button, right? So in the previous model, we were here, we had pressed preview, right? We had gotten, an answer. We had gotten, an answer on accuracy, and then we said, okay, which columns might be impacting the data? And then we press quick build. All right, so let's see what the results we got. So the first thing that comes out, there's 2 parts of the results, right? The analyzed part of Canvas. One tells you if you should trust the model or not, right? So this is what we're looking at here. So how do I know that I should trust this model? It says 97% accuracy, but tell me what that really means, or how do I evaluate it? And so one of the ways that we, as like if you were a data scientist, the best practice, right, would be to take the data you have and take a smaller portion of that data, right? Take 80% of that data as an example, and use that 80% to build the model. And then the rest of the data, the 20% that you held out, it could be like a validation data set where you take that validation data, you send it into the model to see how the model reacts with data that it wasn't trained on, right? So this is a great way to avoid what's called overfitting, right? Because computers are really good at figuring out data, but what you want to do is have it figure out a more general case, right? So that you can use it in the future. And so this is what we've done, right? So in this example, we had 3,792 rows. We held out 759 of those rows to test the model, right? And we trained the model on the rest, right? But this is the holdout. So in that data set, there were 566 false values, right? People did not churn, and there were 193 true values, people who did churn, right? And so if I want to predict true, right, I'm very interested to see how many I got correct, right? And so if the model picks true, it's correct 93% of the time, right? And then if you notice that there are some, like for all values of true, right, there's 193, the model got it wrong a few times, right? And so this is what this second thing is telling you, right, is that, you know, for all of the values that are true, the model still correctly predicted 95%, right? And so if you have a little data science in you, or if you consider yourself a citizen data scientist, you can kind of look behind the scenes and kind of see some details on this, right? So I'm predicting true, right? So behind the scenes, for those, you know, with more knowledge, we display accuracy, but we're actually running the fit statistic we use to make, you know, to kind of optimize for the model is actually what's called F1. And so that's just a more balanced indicator that takes into consideration false positives and false negatives, right? And so we also display that information for you, right, along with other calculations. But so for this example, right, we predicted false, but the actual values were true nine times. And so the model kind of gets it wrong a little bit in that direction, right? And so then here's another one, right? False positives. We predicted true, and in actual case, they weren't going to churn. So so that was 13. And so the model got it wrong in that direction a little bit, right? But those are, you know, small compared to the total number of true negatives and true positives. So I think if we look at this and say, can we trust this model? I think the answer is yes. Now, the other thing that this model can help us understand is the relationship between some of the values in the data and, you know, the predictions. And so as an example, I want to predict whether people will leave, right? Churn is true. And so then I can kind of see. And so there's some interesting insights if we go through some of these columns, right? So the first thing is, this is the overall impact, right? So the number of voicemail messages is highly predictive of whether they're going to leave or not. A number of day minutes. I don't know if I can control the number of voicemail messages, but as a marketing analyst, I may want to take a peek at a few things. So one is like customer service calls, right? And so here's an interesting relationship. So if you look at the number of service calls on the x-axis and the impact to the prediction, impact on the prediction as the y-axis, the larger the positive number, the more this variable or these values impact, right, the prediction of true. What we see is a very interesting pattern. If if my customer calls 3 times or less for customer service, they tend not to churn. But if they have to call 4 times or more, you know, that's a very, very good indicator that they're going to churn. It's very influential for this model. And so there's all kind of actions as a marketing analyst I can kind of take out of this, right? I could go look and see, well, maybe I need to put out some frequently asked questions so that they don't have to call customer service. Or maybe, maybe I can help customer service fix the problem with better insights before they get to 4, right? So there's all kind of actions that can come out of this, right? And so this use of Canvas is what I call exploratory use, right? And so what you see is you see kind of how the data interacts with the prediction, and then you can take these lessons. So this is a clear indicator, right? 4 or more is bad, right? So we'll, if we want to like take some root cause analysis studies and things like that, this is one area. Let's take a look at one other one before we move on, right? And so the, number of minutes, right? And so, okay, here's another pattern, right? Where it looks like when we reach more than 200 minutes of use, the chance of, or the, this impacts whether they want to leave or not, or whether they will leave or not. And so this is another good useful thing for going and exploring outside of Canvas, outside of the data, and see if maybe there's something with our pricing plan where it doesn't make sense for people if they're a heavy user, right? So this is another area as a marketing analyst I would explore. So these are the two things on analyze. Can you trust the model? And then can you get some insights on the model? And I think the answer is yes. The next thing we want to do, though, is we actually want to use this model to predict whether some existing customers might churn or not, right? And so as a marketing analyst, I'm really interested in this to see, I'm going to run some retention campaigns and I want to identify candidates. And so there's two ways you can do prediction within Canvas. I'm going to talk about the use case that I want to run. I want to identify targets for a retention campaign first, right? So I'm going to use batch prediction. This is where I'm going to submit a whole bunch of new data that hasn't actually been scored, or we don't have an answer of whether they churn or not, and then we get a prediction. So let's do that first. So I'm going to select the data set. I could upload it, like I did before, but I've already brought some in. And so I'll just let you take a look at this. So this is new data, data to be scored. And so basically it's the same type of information we had before, but the churn information is missing, right? They're existing customers. And so what we want to do is use this data to see if they're gonna churn, right? So let's pick this data and generate some predictions, right? And so we're going to do it right here in the app. It's going to take a minute or two. Well, it's 419 rows. Yeah, it doesn't take a minute. And then we get an output. And so what do we get, right? So we get the records, of course. We get the prediction, are they going to churn or not? And then we get a probability, right? And so how do we use this information? So this is really interesting, right? So one way to use this information is, okay, I want to see everybody who's going to churn, right? So these are all the true. But the other way to look at this is I want to look at low probabilities. Now, what is this probability score? What it says is how confident the model is that prediction good, or correct. And so here's a great example. This record, we're going to say that this customer, the model says, I don't think this person is going to churn, but I'm only 51% confident that they're not going to churn. Now, how do we use this information? As a marketing analyst, and I'm about to run a retention campaign, I may want to include this customer in the retention campaign. Why? Because maybe the cost of including them in the retention campaign is not that great, right? But just in case, right? It's only 51% probability, right? That's a low confidence. I'm going to include them in the retention campaign. And just to kind of finish with the lowest common denominator, right? They can, you as a Canvas user can download this and, go back into, Excel, and we can, so here's where we started, and right, here's where we end, and we get the churn and the probability, and we can actually take this and do things with it, right? Like I talked about. So let's go back to Canvas for a minute. I'm going to go back to my my telco model. So, okay, so we were at prediction and we ran through batch predictions, right? So we could also do a single prediction. So what's a single prediction? Single prediction is what our customers call a what if, right? And so it allows you to kind of feed the model individual values for these variables and see what the results are, right? So it gives you the ability to kind of, change things and see what, what a likely result would be. And so as an example, we were talking about that, or we showed that customer service calls, right? So right now, with all the other data included, right, and customer service calls being one, we predict that they're not going to churn. But what if we went to 3? Do we still think they're not going to churn? Well, based on all the other data, right, all the other data that's in there, if it goes to 3, we don't think so. Now, let me find this thing so I can show all of the data, right? So, but what if we went to 4? What if, given all this other data is the same, what if they had to make one more customer service call? Would this change the prediction? So in this case, it does, right? What it says is holding everything equal. If that customer service call goes to 4 or more, and it's just like what we saw, right, in the Analyze tab, the prediction goes from false to true. And not only is it a true prediction, but it's a really high probability, right? So the model is like, this person's going to churn if they get to 4. So again, the what if for single prediction, it gives you the ability to kind of look where the boundaries are, to kind of help understand behavior, and then you can take action ahead of time. So this is end to end. We took data, right? We selected data. We asked Canvas to build the model. We got to analyze the results, not only in terms of interesting insights, but also whether we should trust the model. And then we actually ran predictions in app, right? Either batch or single. Now, there's a couple other things I want to explain to you. So far I've been a business analyst, but let's say that I want to get a data science team involved, because this sounds, good, but before I start making my retention campaign, I want to actually get them weighed in. So the first thing I do, and I switched to a different version here to kind of show you what I did, right? The first thing I would do is actually go back and run a standard build. So remember earlier we said standard build is like full AutoML 2 hours, right? So if we do that, what this gives us is maybe a slightly different result, right? Slightly, different accuracy and stuff. We still have all the same information, and we can kind of take in and look and see, okay, F1 really good accuracy, false positives. Now we can also share with the data scientist in their preferred visualization tool, if you will, or environment, which is SageMaker Studio, right? So, hey, please verify. If I can type and talk at the same time. So let's press this button. We get a link which we can send to the data scientist. Now, data scientist, maybe they're, maybe they're in their preferred environment. Here's SageMaker Studio, right? So now I can take that link, and with this link, access a very curated view as a data scientist to what Canvas did behind the scenes, right? So this gives me transparency, visibility, credibility, right? It's not a black box. I get to trust it. So let's take a look. So first of all, if we did some data transformations, we show the data transformation pipeline here, right? And so in the interest of time, I'm not going to drill into everything here because there's a lot. What I may do is make this a little bit bigger so that you can see it. But I told you that Canvas behind the scenes does a lot of pre-processing. So if I want to understand what that pre-processing is, right, I can kind of take a look, and Canvas does a bunch of pre-processing. It takes a look at things. If you want to see the code as a data scientist, so up here in the upper right, there's a little button that says import notebook. You can press that and you can actually get the code in the notebooks. I'm not going to do that today, but I will show you some examples, right? So as an example, one of the things that best practice data processing before an ML model is, is there overlap between variables, right? And so what we see is is that there are some overlap between some of these variables, right? So total day charge and total day minutes seems to provide the same information. We don't need both, right? So there's all the stuff in data preprocessing that Canvas AutoML does behind the scenes. So full visibility to look at that. You also have the ability to look at all of the iterations of Canvas trying out different models, different hyperparameters, right, where it goes through 100 or so iterations. So it came up with the best one, right? So the best model based on the objective, which I told you earlier was F1. We'll take a look at that one in a minute. But we can also see, again, full visibility, right? We can import this notebook and see the code if we want to. We can see all of the things that Canvas did to kind of evaluate different candidates, right? And so here's, I just scroll down a little bit, here's an example, right? So we looked at an XGBoost, right? It's a tree-based model. And so we looked at XGBoost and we did some data transformation, right? So we transformed some numeric features using this imputer, and then we transformed categorical features using one-hot encoding. And then it looks like we did some standardized scaling, because all of this stuff helps the model, right? Helps the algorithm evaluate the model better, right? And then we ran, the models, and here's all the code, right? So again, as a data scientist, this is good because you get full visibility. You can therefore trust what it's doing, and you can check on it too, right? And so let's check on it, right? So we have a best model. So best model, we can take a look at feature importance, the thing, but in a way that a data scientist likes to, right? So we can kind of see like metrics around validation and test. And if I scroll down a little bit, we can see what the best model was. Best model happened to be an XGBoost, but here are the hyperparameters. So there was an input parameter, alpha and eta and gamma, lambda, et cetera. These are the actual values which give us the best result. So that's important to the data scientist. What else is important to the data scientist? Well, they can look at performance metrics in ways that they want to, in a lot more detail, right? Including things like area under the curve and so on. And they can even automatically document this stuff in a PDF, right? So if they wanted to, they could say, okay, here's the documentation on this stuff, and I can move my, where's this thing? Come on, move it over. And then I can, I have this documentation with exactly how we evaluated the model and what it was, right? So it's really powerful. I'll close all of them. So it's really powerful there too. Now, what else is a data scientist interested in? So the other thing that they're interested in is just having access to the raw artifacts, right? And so here we see, okay, we had input data. There's the input data. We separated training and validation data. Remember the best practice of, training on 80% and then using that validation to test the model, see if it's any good. So that's both the original and the transformed, because we did some transformations automatically. We have the code for the transformations and the pipeline model. We have the algorithm models themselves, so that XGBoost and others are sitting there. And then also we have explainability artifacts. And so the data scientists can take these explainability artifacts and get more insights into whether they should trust the model or not, all within SageMaker Studio. So it's a pretty powerful, not black box, white box or transparent, exposure, and it allows the Canvas user to get verification. It allows the data scientist to kind of be happy with that model and maybe even take it over if they want to and do other things, with the full power of the SageMaker platform behind them. So, or SageMaker managed service, right? Including like deploy model. So I'm going to pause here because I've gone full circle, right? And so this is a demonstration on how a marketing analyst could analyze churn, as well as having their colleagues in data science take a look at what they did. All right, so let's bounce back to the PowerPoint for just a second to kind of finish up. So in general, I think if you look at what we went through, SageMaker, if you look at it from the user persona, SageMaker now gives you the opportunity to have an analyst have their own workspace with a specific user experience for them, makes it really easy. But we don't lose anything, right? It's not black box to the data scientist who has their own visualization of that work, their own exposure to it in their own workspace, which supports code and level of detail that the analyst doesn't want or need. So that's the summary. So now let's talk about getting started, right? So the first thing I would encourage you to do if you're thinking about this is think about the personas. So think about how this might be useful for the business analyst. Could also be useful for like the ML professionals like platform admins to kind of support the business analyst. And then of course, people like the business executives, their leadership is like, this is great because we wanted people to democratize ML. So to learn more, the short click is just go to the product webpage, which we have below. I want to provide you with a bunch more links because there are a bunch more links. And so bear with me here. So there's links to the main page. There's links to pricing. We'll talk about how Canvas is priced in just a second. There's links to documentation. There's also a lot of good blogs out there. And so one is an overview blog. So I'd encourage you to go kind of take a look at that. There's also a getting started tutorial in the getting started section of AWS's websites, which will lead you through basically what I just did, with a slightly different use case. So highly encourage you to take a look at the tutorial, detailed step by step. There's also some other interesting blogs. So for the administrator, right, the group behind the business analyst who's supporting them, there's some setup and administration blogs. There's a blog on the collaboration with data scientists that I told you about. So take a look at that if you're a data scientist. Now, if you're a business analyst, there's a whole bunch of blogs for you. One is with slightly different data. There's a customer churn. We have, predicting a risk around the loan status. We have forecasting sales. We have getting insights out of data that's in SAP. We have manufacturing and logistics use cases. And then there's actually step-by-step instructions in our immersion day that separates these kind of use cases into labs. And so, again, another great source of information. Okay, so let me cover just a few more things. One is Canvas is not available everywhere. So it's available right now in 6 regions, and you'll see that change over time as we roll it out to more. I want to talk about some tips and tricks. So remember, Canvas operates on tabular data at the moment, not computer images, not large blocks of free-form text. So think of spreadsheet data, and then you need to form your question accordingly, right? So if you have a question that you think your data can answer, make sure that it's in the form of, I have this target column that might be explained or predicted by the other columns. So if you stick to this, then you'll have success. Let's talk about more tips and tricks. So Canvas does have some limits, less than 1,000 columns. If you think of the spreadsheet, again, rows and columns, it can only handle 1,000 columns at the moment. The standard build model requires more than 500 rows to be in the data set, or otherwise it will tell you, no, I can't run. The reason why that is because you need about 500 rows to get a good get a good result. Quick build, which is the 15-minute version of training, operates on about 50,000 rows right now. And so we'll work to improve that. But at the moment, 50,000 rows. Otherwise, you have to run standard build. There is a kind of an absolute limit on the data set size of about 5 gig. If you think about this, these are comma delimited flat files. And so 5 gig is a lot. So depending on how many columns and rows you have, you know, you should be able to, you know, use a lot of your data sets, but just remember that 5 gig limit. And then I'll mention for time series forecasting model types in particular, you can put in time series and then the target column, and then you can have up to 12 other causal variables. Things like price, as an example, is a good example, is if you're trying to forecast, you know, demand for a product. So keep that in mind. And then the last thing I would say is the collaboration with the data scientists. You need to run standard build to enable that. So let's talk about Canvas pricing. So not to go into great details here, but just to kind of mention, there are 2 ways Canvas charges you, right? One is session charges. So from the time you enter the user interface to the time you log out, you know, that's a session charge, right? And so that demo I just showed you, you know, that was probably 20 minutes, right? So if you go here, right? So when I'm finished, if I just come down and press this log out, I can press the log out and we'll stop charging you for session. Okay, the other way Canvas is priced is you pay for training, right? And so to go back, training is based on the size of the data, right? So if we, as an example, pressed standard or quick, it would be based on the total number of cells, right? So in this case, we had 20 columns and we have 3,700 or so rows. So that's 75,000 cells. So just think of the number of cells in your spreadsheet. And so Canvas has a tiering on that, and you can take a look at the, you know, the website or take a look here, right? So with that being said, one last tip and trick that I want to mention is cost control, right? Because every enterprise thinks about cost control. And so here are some very useful things to consider. So one is use that preview model button, right? So in the demo, the first thing I did was press preview model. Why? Is because I'm not sure if any of that data, any of those columns could actually explain the churn result. And so rather than paying for a training, I just press preview model to get a quick examination, right? So press that preview model, press it a few times, right? Don't be shy. If it shows you something like in this example, if it shows you 97% and it seems like there's some interesting information there that you want to evaluate more, then go ahead and press the training button. And then the other thing, I just kind of walk you through, just press log out, you know, and then that way you'll stop the session billing. And then there's some other things you can explore too. If you're an administrator, you may want to take a look at, you know, the ability to kind of automate the scheduling of shutdowns and stuff. And so there's a link there which can help you. So it's been a long journey. Thank you for your time. I want to open it up for questions now. And I'm Danny Smith. And if you have questions, reach out to me. Otherwise, let's open it up for questions.